Today, our Parsha is Bo, which means go. The first two verses of Parashat Bo say, Then Yud-He Vav-He said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, so that I may display my signs among them, and so that you may recount to your child and your child's child how I dealt severely with the Egyptians and how I displayed my signs, again, my signs among them, so that you may know that I am Yud-He Vav-He. Here God was telling Moses and Aaron and all future generations that everyone would come to know who Elohei HaIvrim, the God of the Hebrews, is. Hallelujah. And how he works in our lives. Why is it, though, that time and again, God needs to remind us about who he is, about what he has done, and of his promises to us? And when I asked myself those questions, I remembered the verse from Proverbs 26, 11 and 12. I'm always telling this to Miriam. Like a dog that returns to its vomit, a fool does the same foolish things over and over again. People who think they are wise when they are not are worse than fools. We might think that Moses, who had firsthand audible experience with the Creator, might have fully understood how God worked and who he was. But God, as Yud-He Vav-He, was just beginning to reveal his power and his attributes to Moses and Aaron. They represented the Israelites. He also revealed them to the Egyptians, who represented the rest of the world. Through many signs and wonders, everyone, all the world, would come to learn about the power of the God of the Hebrews, and that gives me hope for the future, especially in these very frightening days. So it mentioned signs several times. What is the purpose of these signs? I always remember that I always look for signs. Jews look for signs. Now, there's several signs. The rainbow is a sign from God that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. The Shabbat is a sign of his very existence. How else would we know that there's only 7 days in a week? Here in Exodus, each plague served as a sign that the God of the Egyptians held no power over Elohei HaIvrim, the God of the Hebrews, the God of creation. Then we have the sign on the blood, a sign of the blood on the doorposts that we read in Exodus 12:13. And the blood on the houses where you're staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will fasachti, protect. I will protect you so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Fasachti has been poorly translated as Passover. In Leviticus 21:18, we read, Ish Fiseach, meaning a man who is lame. He cannot move by himself. So when God would see the blood on the door, he would be immobile. He would guard the door from the destroyer. Those who trusted him by putting the blood on the door were saved. One more sign in Exodus 13:9. And this shall serve you as a sign on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, so that the Torah of Yud-He Vav-He may be in your mouth, so that with a mighty hand the Lord freed you from Egypt. Now, this, of course, is a metaphor. Our people have used it to wrap the tefillin, but it really is a metaphor. And it's for the service of the Almighty God. Signs in the Torah help us to know God and ultimately come to trust him. The issue always boils down to those who trust him and those who don't. So why is it that after all these signs to Pharaoh, to the Egyptians, to the Hebrews, to Moses and Aaron, they still had trouble trusting that God would do all that he said he would? Trust is not natural in us. It takes time and an act of the will to build it. Remember, we've been given the gift of faith, but we must use that faith to build trust. Pharaoh used his will to harden his heart against trusting in anything but himself. To him, the plagues were not signs of God's power. They were simply a magician's trick. That's all he knew. Now, when archaeologists and historians today explain that these plagues were simply acts of nature, they too, like Pharaoh, are hardening their hearts and teaching, stimulating others to do the same. Pharaoh was convinced that he was the mighty and powerful God of Egypt. How could a God of slaves be more powerful than him? How many people today, whether they're rich or poor, weak or powerful, how many of them are like Pharaoh? The more stubborn Pharaoh made himself, the more God allowed his heart to be hardened so that he could no longer see the damage he was doing to his people, to his family, to the point of him losing his firstborn son, his whole lineage, and ultimately his army. So he destroyed everything around him and was brought to his knees. Pharaoh refused to take responsibility for the lives of his subjects. He was blinded by his selfishness. Do you and I have a choice when it comes to areas in our own lives where we have become too stubborn, and that causes to those around us to suffer, as well as suffering for ourselves? Can we truly change our minds, our paradigms, or are we doomed to follow Pharaoh's example? Now, we speak of needing a touch from God or having an epiphany before we can change. Pharaoh didn't have those. And yet Moses said to him, "How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me?" From these words, it seemed to me that he had the ability to humble himself, to change his mind and his attitude. But he didn't. So do we. We have that choice. But sometimes it's easier to remain as we are. It takes hard work to change our status quo. And consciously or unconsciously, we prefer to stay the way we are and blame others for what happens to us. We say, look what they did to me. It's not my fault that I'm the way that I am. It's theirs. When I was studying to be a hypnotherapist, I learned much about the human mind and about our unconscious behavior. I saw the process of how we make choices. There are always payoffs for what we choose to do. We can unconsciously make ourselves sick so that we don't have to do something that we don't want to do. I constantly challenged my thought processes and still do. A silly example, like when someone said to me, I remember, "You can't only eat one chip." I said to myself, why not? Who said so? It's like superstitions. Don't go walk under a ladder, or you'll have 13 years of bad luck if you break a mirror. All these things. But with this chip, I took one chip and I put the bag away. No one was controlling me but myself. Of course, it's not always easy because it all depends on our willingness to make the effort to change. And especially with the added help of God, it becomes much easier. He's a key component in changing our hearts. Moshe had a role to fulfill as leader of his people, and it wouldn't be easy. My people are stubborn. We are called stiff-necked, which is why it took us 40 years to reach the promised land instead of just 11 days. To be stubborn means to be obstinate and to be difficult to lead. So let's ask ourselves, am I stubborn? Am I not good at taking directives in health matters, when I'm in the kitchen or at work? Am I someone who, once I make up my mind, I'm closed to all other possibilities? Or am I flexible, open to learning, to be told things about myself that I may not want to hear? Listen to what Psalms 32, 8-10 says. "Let me enlighten you and show you which way to go. Let me offer counsel. My eye is on you. Don't be like a senseless horse or mule whose movement is curbed by bit or bridle. Far be it from you. Many are the torments of the wicked, but the one who trusts in the Lord shall be surrounded by favor. Isn't it fantastic to know that we are surrounded by God's favor, especially in the midst of our daily struggles on this journey through our life? Our people living in Goshen were surrounded by God's favor, even though they were probably so frightened as they watched the world around them being destroyed. We too watch as the world around us is falling deeper into madness and chaos. But you and I can choose a different path, one in which we know that God's favor is with us. I feel that so often in so many little ways. Someone asked me if God can speak to us in a voice that can be heard. Of course he can. It may not be an audible voice like it was at Mount Sinai, but he speaks to us in ways that we can understand. And even when our behavior falls short for a while, or we lose our way, we only have to say, Lord, help me. And he shows up. Whenever the storms of life hit us hard, we can and we must choose to trust him. We must choose to trust him. Tell him out loud, I trust you, my God. Help me in my unbelief. He doesn't need to hear it. We do. Our prophet Jeremiah in chapter 17, verse 8 said, Blessed are those who trust in the Lord. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. The Torah is living water. We can choose to drink it daily or not. Let's not allow anyone to take away our living water. Let's reach out when we feel like we're drowning. There will always be someone to pull us out. You know, many people of the world today are just like Pharaoh. They've hardened their hearts against the God of Israel and his people. Some stand with us, but the majority are silent, especially in the wake of the latest terror attacks upon the people of Israel. Like the ancient Israelites who needed to see the power of their God at work, the modern Israelites need to see that without God, we are nothing. We can do little without the God who formed us. The more that people harden their hearts against the God of creation, the more plagues and disasters will come upon this world. Exodus 11:3 is so important. It says, Yiten Adonai etchen ha'am. The Lord gave grace to the Egyptians toward the people. Moreover, Moses himself was much esteemed in the land of Egypt, among Pharaoh's servants and among the people. Alavai, may it be so. In Exodus 12:7, God said to Moses, Not a dog shall snarl at any of the Israelites, at human or beast, so that you may know that Yud He Vav He, the God of creation, makes a distinction between Egypt, which any nation can be substituted for Egypt, and Israel. Israel is a distinct nation, and no one can harm us unless God allows it. It is God who turns the heart of our enemy toward us or against us. When he is with us, no one can harm us. When he turns his face from us, we lose his protective covering. So what can we do? Let's read the Torah for ourselves and live by the light of its principles, and do as our great Rabbi and prophet Yeshua told us. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Without this, our words mean nothing. Let's stop adding and subtracting from God's words, as he told us. Such as Exodus 12:2. This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Pesach is our new year, not Yom Teruah, or as it has been named Rosh Hashanah. Every single thing that we do, that we believe in, needs to be measured by the written Torah. And above all, let us not be afraid, for he will never leave us. He will never forsake us. Let us keep repeating these words over and over to ourselves. And let us put our faith into action. As we said, emunah, to build our trust, bitachon, in him, Elohei ha'ivrim, the God of the Hebrews. Shabbat shalom.